Ireland are back with a vengeance. Newsnight is an exclusive site of a new report called The Return of the Militants, which claims that dissident groups, including a new particularly dangerous faction of the real IRA, will not be negotiated into abandoning their current campaign. The report for the International Centre for the Study of Radicalisation and Political Violence at King's College London also claims that security services bearing the brunt of hostilities were caught off guard by the strength of the resurgence of Republican violence. Here's Liz McKean.
I am not asking anyone to surrender. I am asking everyone to declare the victory of peace.
Tony Blair talked of an unstoppable path to peace. But for growing numbers of Irish Republicans, it's not turning out that way. In the last 2 years, there has been a surge in attacks. More bombings, more shootings, more riots. The people behind them are called dissidents. It's a term they can't stand because they see themselves as true Republicans with a responsibility to drive the British out of here by force. This man spent over 30 years trying to do just that before joining the peace process. We agreed to film him anonymously. He says that more of his old comrades are moving over to the dissident groups.
There are lots of people crossing over. I personally know of a man who could be described as one of the most prolific assassins thrown up by the 35 years of war. He has now left the organisation that he belonged to, having been part of the peace process. And he has seen nothing change, and he has now moved to the rails, I understand, to the real IRA.
The drift of older Republicans away from Sinn Féin is confirmed in a new study of violent dissidents seen by Newsnight. The Return of the Militants says, far from dissipating, they're growing in strength. And there's little prospect that the phenomenon of militant Irish republicanism will be disappearing anytime soon.
I think we've seen the coming together of two distinct generations in the dissident Republican world. At the one level, the disillusioned 17, 18, 19-year-olds who form, if you like, the foot soldiers of that movement, who have been fed a narrative that it helps explain them why their lives are not what they hoped they would be, i.e. the traditional Republican narrative. Giving them that narrative is a band of 40-somethings, former provisionals who've left the movement, disillusioned with the political trajectory of Sinn Féin and the leadership provided to that movement by Gerry Adams and Martin McGuinness.
Last month, a powerful car bomb caused extensive damage in the heart of Derry. It had been parked outside the Ulster Bank. The bomb was planted by the real IRA, one of the main terrorist groups, responsible for the murders of 2 off-duty soldiers last year. Its sights are set not just on the forces of law and order, but on commercial targets, like the bank. Gary Donnelly has been accused of belonging to the real IRA, something he denies. He insists he doesn't speak for them either, but he does understand their motives.
I think that it's inevitable that these groups are going to do this. I won't condemn them. I will.
Do you support them?
Do I support them? I won't condemn them. I think that, I think they're justified. I think that Irish people taking up arms against British occupation is 100% justified. It may not be nice, but however, I believe it is totally and absolutely justified.
Kieran Boyle has also turned his back on Sinn Féin. 2 years without a job, he says the party has let young Republicans down.
I supported Sinn Féin right up until 2006. We were promised growth, jobs, freedom, but that didn't happen. So a lot of young people like myself have become disillusioned with the whole peace process.
And are these young people, some of them, turning to the armed groups?
There will be passive support, yes, for the armed groups. When the IRA attacked the bank, yes, I didn't hear no young people saying that it was wrong or condemn it.
Did you support that attack?
I wouldn't condemn it.
As well as the real IRA, the continuity IRA is still active and dangerous. But the biggest threat comes from a new faction of the real IRA called Oglia na HÉireann, or Volunteers of Ireland. Police figures put their combined attacks since the start of the year at 110. That's a tally of all terrorist incidents, not just those directed at police.
These aren't just young men feeling their way, like we had to in 1969. They can rely on a breadth of experience. There's people coming in all the time from PIRA, from INLA, and they bring with them a wealth of experience.
Some of that experience was on display this summer when serious rioting broke out in the nationalist Ardoyne area of Belfast in protest of Protestant marches. Even that pillar of the Sinn Féin community, Jerry Kelly, seemed powerless to make it stop. What happened here showed how Sinn Féin's traditionally tight grip on its community has weakened. In elections, the support is still there. People tend to vote tribally. But day to day, there's been a drift away from the party. Martin O'Meehan, who spent time in prison for the cause, is one of those who's left.
I would acknowledge and accept Sinn Féin still have a mandate, and that mandate should be respected. Their support has dropped considerably because of the lack of movement towards the island of equals that they are exposed to, and also the lack of economic freedom within these areas. There was promises made, and those promises haven't been delivered on.
Meehan's stance is the more striking given his family history. His father, also Martin, was an IRA prisoner who stayed loyal during the peace process. His former brothers-in-arms carried his coffin at his funeral 3 years ago. But his son believes they've sold Republicans short. You don't support armed struggle anymore?
No.
But this is a very small corner of the world. Everybody knows everybody. Do you try and persuade those people who are still using weapons that they should stop?
Well, you would have to have something tangible, something that you can grasp to persuade anyone to not to engage in armed activity against the British. So at present, there's nothing tangible there to grasp, hold on to, or, you know, the Good Friday Agreement has not worked. Stormont has not worked. The St Andrews Agreement has not worked.
But violence has never worked to get the British out of Northern Ireland.
Yeah, but, you know, violence and me, you know, I'm a former combatant, I'm not a combatant. I'm a former IRA volunteer, I'm not a volunteer. I'm a former political prisoner. So
what do you think, though, when you see people still taking up arms?
Well, I won't criticise them at all.
The task facing security forces was apparent when the real IRA set off a car bomb at Palace Barracks in Belfast, home of the new MI5 headquarters. The target was significant, not least because MI5 is running intelligence gathering in Northern Ireland. There have been some successes. Arrests are up, there's closer than ever cooperation with police in the south. Even so, the range and scale of attacks, like the one in this lay-by, mean the security response is under scrutiny. We spoke to a former Army intelligence officer who worked here up until MI5 took over. Even allowing for interagency rivalry, his impressions are damning.
The overall impression of the handlers was that MI5 weren't up to it. There's a reluctance to go to Northern Ireland, spend time there, put the hours in on the ground.
He believes the response to the recent upsurge in violence was far too slow.
I was quite surprised by the upsurge. Maybe we became complacent. We weren't as all over it as we thought we were.
And on the policing side, it hasn't been a smooth transition either.
Well, the plan was that it would be managed, that we would have a phased process where the capability of the organisation would be run down and put into a different approach to policing in parallel with the political changes support for police and decommissioning. In practice, that didn't happen. There were political difficulties. Sinn Féin did a brilliant job of negotiation as a result of that. A lot of the security infrastructure was wound down perhaps much more quickly than it should have been. And as a consequence of that, a number of gaps opened up.
The return of the Militants, published tomorrow, raises the thorny prospect of negotiations, but argues it's unlikely that the modern-day dissidents can be persuaded to accept current political realities.
I think at the current time, the only conceivable response is a security-based one,